Dan Bongino. He's an interesting character because he'll usually like toe the middle line of like any conservative position, and that's what you usually get from him. He'll toe the middle of the line of whatever conservative position is. I don't see him taking big risks, right? He's pretty middle of the road type of Fox News contributor. When I say middle of the road, that is not to indicate that he is a centrist or a moderate. That is to indicate that if you lick your finger and put it up to the sky to indicate which path the party's going, checking in with Dan Bongino, Don Bongino, whatever. Dan, is it Dan or Don? It's Bongino, whatever. Mr. Bonge over here, okay? He is basically a good way to kind of test the air to see where the Republican Party's going. Don't watch him. He's a grade A moron. He's a co-founder of Parler. Not a big surprise for me. Didn't know that. Anyway, I wanted to watch his position on liberal intellectuals, because apparently he goes after the intelligentsia in this. He goes after defunding the police. He's a warrior, a culture warrior against the crazies on the left. And I wanted to hear his argumentation a little here.
All right, we're back with the Fox News alert. A manhunt intensifying for the person of interest. And look at this video in a Times Square.
So there was a shooting in Times Square where somebody tried to kill somebody else, and it ended up injuring 3 people. As far as I know right now, nobody's dead.
Shooting that injured 3 people.
Farrakhan Muhammad's brother told New York City Police Department Muhammad meant to shoot him, his brother, after they'd had a dispute. Instead, he shot 3 innocent bystanders, including a 4-year-old girl.
An officer is hailed a hero after she was seen rushing that young little girl to the ambulance, describing her as the strongest little girl I have ever seen. Let's bring in Dan Bongino, Fox News contributor, former NYPD officer. Very touching when you see that officer.
Let me be clear. Cop who saved the little girl, hero. Don't really have much more to comment on the matter. Happy the girl was saved. I don't think there's much more to comment on the matter. Except to help the guy who's still at large, as far as I know, should be apprehended.
Sir, this is exactly why we don't need to defund police, and we need more.
Izzy Rat $5. I hope you are doing well, Dylan.
Thank you so much, Izzy Rat. I appreciate the $5. Now listen closely here.
Very touching when you see that officer. This is exactly why we don't need to defund police, and we need more officers.
Okay, so next time anyone ever tells you after a tragedy, say a school shooting of some sort, right? Or some natural disaster that could have been somewhat caused by climate change, and you come out and you say, we need comprehensive gun control, or we need a Green New Deal, what you'll hear from the tops of the mountains, from the tip of the Fox News pyramid, all the way down to your Glenn Becks, through your Steven Crowders, from your Don Bonginos, to your Ben Shapiros, to your Tucker Carlsons with his White Power Hour, right? Is a unified message, and it is stop politicizing tragedies. Stop politicizing tragedies. But once it's on the other foot, and there was a shooting that could be used to make one of what they consider one of their interest groups, which I guess they would say is hyping up the police force to make it look like there's no problems in this country, they will immediately politicize a child getting shot. Once it's outside of a school, that is. Once it's outside of a school, then it can be politicized. We can politicize our tragedies. You just can't politicize your tragedies. The rules are for thee, but not for me. But what I find interesting is I think this idea of politicizing tragedies to be completely bogus. It makes no sense. Let's take this to its logical conclusion. Let's say there's a school bus crash. It's very tragic. All of the kids in the school bus and the driver all died upon impact. But we know that a lot of lives could have been saved if school buses had seatbelts. And You say after the school bus crash, like, hey, in order to stop this from happening again, we should get seatbelts and put them in school buses. And immediately, the pundits stand up and they decry you. How dare you use all these dead kids and the dead school bus driver and the damage in this tragedy for your political purposes to favor seatbelts. Now, any reasonable person would know that, number one, you simply are stating this because you want to stop tragedies like this from occurring again. And number two, if not now, then when? If we do not talk about what causes these tragedies and what could be done to prevent these tragedies after these tragedies occur, then when are we supposed to talk about them? This is when the national spotlight is on the issue. So why not talk about it now when it would be most convenient and most productive? And when there's the most hunger for change. The reason why they don't want you to politicize tragedies is because the wound is fresh, and that is when people will be most willing to bring about real change on these issues. That is when people are most willing to have their minds changed on things like gun control, or in this instance, seatbelts in school buses. All of this complaining about politicizing tragedies is nothing more than trying to pivot out and deviate from finding the solution to these tragedies, because they're either backed by corporations that would be unhappy about the changes. Say the school bus lobby in this instance, whoever makes the buses doesn't want to have to add extra safety features. And they just don't want the solution that would be the obvious fix for it, for ideological reasons. And so instead of actually having the conversation where they would have to take the back foot because the whole nation is angry at them for their inaction and constant stalling, they can avoid the conversation altogether by moralizing and saying, how dare you talk about bringing about real change after this tragedy. Sorry I went on that little tangent, but I think that needed to be said.
She said she became a cop, Dan, because she just wants to help people. What do you think?
Yeah, it's incredible video. And listen, the era of social media and cell phone cameras everywhere haven't been great for everything, right? We can probably all agree. But sometimes in moments like this, we really need to see this stuff, Haynes.
So I don't know if he means that by like just the idea like, oh, cell phones are bad because instead of like looking at your family member and having a conversation, you're on your phone playing the Flappy Bird, or if he means it like in some instances when it's catching instances of police brutality, like that's not good. I can't tell, so I'm going to try to be good faith and assume it's the former.
I mean, why think about this, right? If you're a leftist, not necessarily a Democrat. A lot of Democrats realize this defund the police thing is a disaster. I mean, just read their post-election analysis. But if you're a liberal, a radical leftist, and you think defunding the police is
liberal radical leftist, these words literally. Here's the thing: you'll hear radical leftist, radical left, and then liberal, as if these are the same things. These words mean nothing to Don and to a lot of these pundits, because these words have no real definitions to these pundits, because politics is not something on an ideological level they've dug into. They haven't, quote unquote, grounded their axioms. They don't know the definitions for these words. Thankfully, though, for them, after the era of Rush Limbaugh, these words have kind of morphed into amorphous blobs for most Americans. And so when he says that sentence, sadly, most Americans don't bat an eye.
Analysis. But if you're a liberal, a radical leftist, and you think defunding the police is a good idea, you probably also believe, right? It's probably a fair assumption that stereotyping people based on collective group characteristics is a bad idea, right? I'm just trying to walk through some logic with the left. Stereotyping people because of their race, their whatever their sexual preference, whatever it may be, that's a bad idea, correct? So why is it okay to do it to cops?
Okay, so these two things are not related in any way. I understand the point he's eventually going to go to, but again, unrelated in any way. Now we can have an actual conversation, and this is the conversation Don wants to avoid because this is actually requires nuance. The actual conversation around defunding the police is this: if we defund the police, take money away from them, that's not just taking money away to spite cops. That's not what it's doing. It's not taking money away so cops do their job less and people aren't protected. That's not the goal. The idea is that cops are over-militarized and a lot of money is being wasted on militarized equipment, drones and stuff, armored cars and stuff of that sort, when those resources would be better well spent to deal with the issues that cops have to deal with by allocating many of those funds to things like mental welfare programs and social welfare programs that are likely and hopefully would decrease crime. Because when you put more resources and opportunities in front of people, they're less likely to take up a life of crime. And less people taking up a life of crime makes cops' jobs easier because they are less likely to have to deal with violent criminals or other type of issues and mental health cases and stuff like that. And that cops in today's society are overburdened. That a cop, no matter the scenario, is called and trained and are supposed to deal with mental health cases, violent crime, robberies, evictions, police raids with no-knock warrants and knock warrants and all these different things, and that they're overburdened. That when we have a societal issue, we just throw a guy with a gun at it and hope somehow we can come out the other end looking pretty. And most of the time, sadly, for societal issues, that is, we don't come out the other side of looking pretty. The best example would be the drug war, which has been an absolute failure. What we needed was drug rehabilitation programs and certain regulations, not a hardcore crackdown. That would be the general argument for defunding the police. The counterance that I actually think somebody could make that is a good point is, well, I understand that, and maybe that's a good, and I would agree with demilitarization of the police and that more money should go to these social programs, but in order to increase things like de-escalation training and in order for people to be able to do other things and get the cops ready for the scenarios that we want them better trained for, so we do less combat training and more de-escalation training, that is actually going to require money. And so when you say defund the police, we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we are actually restricting funds that are going to be necessary to reform the police, investments in body cameras, investments in de-escalation training. That is the legitimate debate to be had over defunding the police. You can also have a rhetorical debate about the effectiveness of the term when we talk about public discourse, but that's not the conversation Dan Bongino wants to have. The conversation Dan Bongino wants to have is how this is somehow like racism, but towards cops. Now, that can't be at all said about the term defunding the police, and he knows that. And so instead of actually making this about defund the police, he pivots to another term, ACAB, which stands for all cops are bastards. Now, you couldn't equivocate racism with anti-cop bigotry, I guess you could call it, because the thing is, a man can't choose to be black. A man can choose to be a cop or not. Now, that's not to say about the effectiveness or the truth of the statement behind ACAB. I am not somebody who uses the term ACAB. I think it's unproductive. I don't think it works, and I think it's terrible marketing. And I don't use the term. It's not a term I ascribe to. I understand why people use it as a term of frustration in a system that is unmoving towards them as it oppresses their people, but it's not a term that I use. But the reason why he pivots to ACAB is simply because he can't actually argue about defund the police outside of the straw man version where defund the police is we hate cops, cops suck, therefore we're going to take all their guns away so all the violent criminals can be violent. And so he has to pivot away from that because he doesn't have the nuance required in order to have the actual conversation around defund the police.
I don't understand that. I'm asking a serious question. So the radical left has this ACAB saying, which is not friendly for the air, especially all cops are. You fill in the blanks. It's not a nice.
That is not the same thing as defund the police. Don't equivocate the two.
Word. All cops. That's what ACAB stands for. Leftists spray painted all over the place. These radicals. So it's okay to do that to cops.
The leftist liberals, if I know anything about liberals, is they love to say all cops are bastards. if liberals are usually the ones that are the reformers, the ones who want reformative policies. They're not exactly known for being the hardcore revolutionaries to overthrow the government. They're for reformative policies. So liberals are not really the ones saying ACAB. But again, these words mean nothing to him. But earlier he was saying the leftist radical liberals, all of the, just mushing all these things together. Switch Light, thank you so much for the tier 1. Appreciate it.
But it's not okay to do it to everyone else. And you wonder, like, are these sane people anymore? Like,
when he says, but it's not okay to say it to everyone else, it almost feels like, and I know it isn't, but it's just what it feels like. It almost feels like they get to be bigoted towards the cops. Why can't I be bigoted towards the minority group? That's what it almost feels like. I know that's not the point he's making, but it hilariously somewhat feels like that. But again, I would say, even if I don't agree with ACAB, you can't equivocate a job and a race. You can quit being a cop. You can't quit being black.
is this, and I'm really glad you saw that video, because again, you see that these cops out there doing their job for almost no money, by the way, are not doing it for fame and glory. They're doing it for moments like that to save people's lives. It's really a disgrace. And I want to tell every cop out there listening, police officer out there listening, I will use my time on Fox News from now until they have me, until the day they let me go or I go to the grave, to advocate for you guys, because I know what you do every day, and 99% of you, they're busting your butts to keep people's...
Let's think about it, though. Advocating for cops. If we think about what cops face in this country, right? Let's think about the problem. Let's think legitimately. Let's do it right now. Let's think about the issues that a common cop on the beat faces in the United States. Of course, they face the threat of violence, violent crime, dying on the job. Every time they walk into service, they have the chance they could come home in a coffin. That is a reality they face. They face violent crime, drugs, psychological cases, poverty, loitering, traffic violations, firearms, illegal firearms trading, all these different things. They have to deal with evictions, raids, police raids, no knock warrants and knock warrants, and a lot of paperwork. These are just some of the issues the cops face, and some of the things they have to deal with. I only listed a few. If I was legitimately thinking, how could we be an advocate for police? Like legitimately being an advocate for police. What would you do? Personally, I would want to lessen the burden that is placed upon them, as every issue in society is thrown at them as if somehow they have the key to all of society's ills. Cops are supposed to be there when society fails and there is a break of the social contract, that somebody doesn't respect the law, breaks it. The cop is supposed to be there to maintain order. But the social contract is being broken a lot. A lot of people are violating the law. A lot of people are doing these muggings, doing these crimes, and these psychological cases are getting worse, and mental health care is awful in this country. Poverty pushes more people into violent crime. So what would you do to deal with this? Some people say, militarize the cops. What we need to do is give them more and more funding through the roof. Not to go to their pensions, not to go to their paychecks, as some will make you think, but to go towards drones, armored cars, militarization. But many cops will tell you, well, I haven't even fired a firearm on the job. There's many cops who've never used a firearm in the entirety of their service. Yet we spend so much money on militarization as a solution for all these crimes. Has that worked for the drug war? No. Has that worked for destroying violent crime on our streets? No. What about other countries? Let's look at Brazil. When Jair Bolsonaro came into power, his solution for the violent crime spikes in Brazil was to advocate for everyone to pick up a gun and for the cops to be more brutal with the criminal. Has that dealt with it? No, it hasn't. It has failed miserably. So obviously, this path of cop advocacy, which is about 2 steps from handing every officer a bazooka that they'll never use, hasn't worked. In fact, I would say that the right has been bad advocates for cops. And Dan Bongino, in fact, you have been a bad advocate for police. Here is what I would do if I wanted to advocate for police. I'd want to lessen the burden. I'd want to make it so there were less breaks in the social contract. How do we do this? Well, generally, if you want to reduce crime, one of the best things you could do is reduce poverty. Give people opportunity. When poverty goes down, so does crime. This is true of all countries and of all groups and of all faiths all across the world. So what do? You invest in social programs. You invest in education. For the mental health cases, you invest in healthcare, specifically mental health care. You invest in jobs programs. Unionization. If you give somebody a good union job, they'll set for life. They got a union to protect them. They're the farthest thing from a gang. If you get somebody a good union job, who in their right mind would throw that away to go join the Bloods or the Crips or MS-13 or name your gang? It could be Hell's Angels, the Pagans. I'm just naming biker gangs now. I have an extensive amount of biker gang history. There's a small tidbit about me. Pagans are actually from my county. They were started in Prince George's County. That's how you deal with this. You invest in mental health care. You invest in social programs. You invest in jobs programs. You invest in education. And then what you're doing is giving people opportunities out of poverty. And once they're out of poverty, they're less likely to choose the option that is go join a gang because they have more options available to them. This lessens the amount of people that cops will be interacting with that are engaged in violent crime, drug crime. Oh, if we completely change our approach to the drug war, we're going to greatly reduce the burden that we place upon cops. That takes money, investment in other areas. Instead of investing in these armored cars and investing in these drones, we invest this money towards these programs. And that ultimately makes a cop's job on the beat easier because they have to deal with less criminals and less breaks of the social contract. We are helping the cop do their job by maintaining order. The social contract is preserved. If you want to be a real advocate for police, the rerouting of funds away from militarization and towards investing in your community is the best way to do it. And by the way, these investments are going to benefit the cops as well. Investments in education, the cops' kids go to school. The cops' kids want to access mental health care. The cop doesn't want their kid to get hooked on dope and heroin and all this other stuff. So if you want to be an advocate for cops, I see that advocacy right now a lot more on the left for policies that would actually, the economic ones that we're talking about right now, not some ACAB or whatever, but the policies I'm talking about right now, I see those policies more on the left than I do see on the right. And so I think the right is doing a self-defeating strategy of advocacy for police.
Streets safe. You really, at great cost to yourself.
And Dan, think about this. They got rid of the anti-crime unit. They cut $1 billion from the force. They cut 4,000 people from there. They can't get close to getting 100 people for an academy class, which is a joke. And meanwhile, when you go on, you're looking at...
Here's another thing. A lot of the problems with staffing in police departments is due to the reputation that police have in this country right now. A lot of people leaving high school are looking at the news, and the first thing they think isn't, man, I'd love to become a police officer, because cops have terrible PR. For legitimate reasons. Policing has a lot of problems in this country. How do you fix that? Well, if you invest in the community and demilitarize the police, I think a lot more people would be willing to put on a blue uniform than if we keep the status quo. You're not going to change the cops' PR. the PR around the police, or the willingness of people to become a cop just by letting the current situation around racial issues or economic issues or militarization, people aren't going to want to become a cop in this environment ever. And by doing the same thing, you're not going to magically just line up people down the block to become cops just because you got a good pension plan at the end of the day. People don't want to deal with the environment that is currently being a police officer. How do you deal with that? These investments in the community that could help relieve some of the burden that is placed on police forces, I think, is a big step forward to making becoming a cop a more appealing position. I think if cops didn't have the reputation that they currently do in this country of extreme racial discrimination and of killing unarmed black people, by dealing with the racial discrimination and these extremely disgusting racists that are within the organization, not saying everyone, just people like Derek Chauvin, for example, then maybe more people would be willing to become cops. This isn't an issue you're going to solve by just blindly throwing money at police departments. Money doesn't magically solve racism by just throwing it at armored cars and drones. You got to actually put the money where it's needed most. And that's not in drones. There's not a lot of people marching through the community right now saying, hey, ho, ho, more investment in drones. That's not a thing. That's not a chance that is currently going on in this country.
Get out to a less divisive culture out in Nassau County or Suffolk County. So having said all that, now they want to all of a sudden secure the place for tourists. We want tourists to come back. You know where that happened? 42nd Street. You know what happened at 7:45 at night, the same night? A guy got stabbed in the chest with a screwdriver on Chamber Street, a beautiful area, neighborhood area. And you want cops to be defunded. You want to dismantle law enforcement and then ask tourists to come back?
You want to dismantle law enforcement. You want to do this vague, ultimate evil enemy that is the left. You don't need to say specifics, because you know what? You go check Nancy Pelosi. She's not like wearing a balaclava with a Molotov throwing it at the local police department. I'm sorry. That is not occurring. And if you look here, he's using a single instance. He's not using data. He's not using, like, here's the crime spikes that happened when it comes to defunding police. And there have been areas where police have been defunded and there's been crime spikes. Now, whether it's been correlated specifically to that, correlation does not equal causation, of course. But he's not working off of data. He's working off an extremely emotional example. Someone with a screwdriver stabs somebody. Oh my goodness, that is awful. And I agree, that is awful. That is awful. But I could just as easily say, well, here's an instance of a police officer taking his baton and beating someone, or placing evidence, and or oh, let's look at the Rodney King case. You're going to have to expand past a single individual example, an emotional example, if you actually want to make a concrete point here. I think I've watched this to its fruition. I doubt in the next 5 minutes they're gonna address anything I've said. So I think we've watched enough of this video. I think that's enough for YouTube, eh? Hey, and everybody on YouTube, hey? I'd appreciate a sub. I really would. Everybody in chat, say hi to YouTube. Say hi to YouTube quick. Kind of hard to see. Look at them. Look at them all. Look at all these sheeple immediately saying hello. Sid Machinery attacking you guys. Anyway. Let's go to the next segment. You know what? We can just finish this anyway. Just not extend the YouTube segment.
Forget it.
You know, Brian, one of the great intellects of our time is Thomas Sowell. He's a legend. He's been on this network off and on, but he's really a genius. And he says all the time, I'm not quoting him directly, but the gist of it is this, that, you know, only an intellectual, couldn't figure this out, right? So let me get this straight. Like liberal intellectuals, you're going to engage in bail reform, effectively letting bad guys out on the street so there's no penalty for their crimes.
No, that's not what bail reform is. Bail reform has to do with the idea that if a court believes that somebody is not enough of a threat to restrain them and to simply say, here's a price tag for going out, what that does is makes it so the wealthy can leave when they want and the poor are restrained when they commit crimes. It is rigging the system in favor of the wealthy when it comes to bail. If a person is too dangerous to be let back on the streets, there should be no price tag attached to them. They should be restrained without exception. Point blank, period. And if somebody is not dangerous enough to be restrained until the court date, then just let them leave. What's the problem? Why do we need to put a price tag on it? All that does is mean the rich can go as they please once they commit crimes, and the poor must be restrained. Point blank, period. Dylan, do you have any idea when you react to my video? Dylan, I emailed you, but you didn't get back. Well, I'm not agreeing to react to any video just because you emailed it to me, but I'll go check it after stream today, see if it's worth reacting to.
You're then going to attack the police and the media pretty much every day.
Hey, Stoic, thanks for the compliment for the cat ears. I appreciate it.
You're going to jump to the conclusion in every use of force incident that the police is the bad guy before even giving them due process. You're going to pay them nothing, and then you're going to pull their qualified immunity so they could lose their house, their bank account, and everything. And
there has to be repercussions for if you do something wrong. If you go kill an unarmed person, if you go do something wrong as a cop, there needs to be consequences. When it comes to the issue of qualified immunity, it is not because we want to go on some witch hunt against innocent goody two-shoot cops. It is because there has to be consequences for those who break the law or do immoral things. And if someone does something immoral, there has to be a consequence for that. Could you imagine? We are the nation based in freedom. We are the nation based in liberty. We are the nation that's supposed to care about those principles. Yet, the most direct representation of government power in this country is a man with a gun who is there to make sure you follow the laws. And those people, those are the ones which we don't want the checks and balances on. Those are the ones we want to give ultimate unchecked power. The people who can quite literally decide if we live or die and has been given sanction by the government to just walk around with a gun on their waist that they can use against us. And other forms of violence like pepper spray and batons. And they can detain us, restrict our movement. And those are the individuals we need to leave unregulated. Those are the individuals we need to leave unrestricted. Those are the individuals who need no consequences. I can't think of anything that's supposed to be more un-American.
Only an intellectual or a liberal is sitting here going, gosh, why is it we can't recruit any police officers? Sure. I mean,
how many subs do we need for a maid stream? Ooh, the maid outfit. I haven't put on that in a while. Well, I mean, if you guys want to really replace hot tub stream with maid stream, we can do that, but I don't know, probably a lot. Not tonight. It would be another day if we did it.
I mean, the same people watching your show are like, yeah, that sounds like kind of a crappy job right now, even though the mission of a police officer is still one of the most heroic we have.
And it is Police Week this week.
Absolutely. Dan, last week we were talking about how Facebook said, no, Donald Trump, we're not going to let you back onto our platform. And now, as people are going, are these tech companies too big? NBC did a poll and asked, does social media do what to the country? About 2/3 say that social media divides the country. So, they call it social media because it sounds like everybody's being social.
The thing is, Fox News has played a large part. Partisan media, extremely partisan media, like Fox News, has played a large part in that division. So for any Fox News host to complain about dividing the country when they were the station, they were the channel that entertained conspiracy theories about the Democrats stealing the election and all this voter fraud and Trump was done in. They entertained those conspiracy theories, which made certain Americans in this country believe that the Democratic Party is an anti-democracy institution that stole an election, undermined the country, and we don't have a country anymore. The station with Tucker Carlson that called immigrants dirty and known for hosting his white power hour. And they want to claim about, and these hosts are the ones that are going to complain about dividing the country. The hypocrisy is on complete full display. It's almost a comedy act. This feels like a bad SNL skit at this point.
But it sounds like it's pretty toxic.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? The report you guys sent me to do this, I'm in that NBC News thing. My name, because my Facebook page is either 1 or 2 in the country on any given day based on CrowdTangle, which is Facebook's tool. Right. That's based on reach.
He is right. Anytime you check like top 10 Facebook posts on any given day, Dan Bongino is almost always near the top, or at least in the top 10. He has an amazing Facebook page. By the way, something to consider when you hear the next like Facebook is censoring conservatives line is that Dan Bongino, again, always in the top 10. In fact, usually there's a lot of conservatives in the top 10.
And other things. I mean, I don't say that as a pat on the back. I say it because, but who better to comment on this story than me? But this is an absurd story. Number one, Facebook and Twitter, they're left-wing companies. We get it. Let's stop pretending it's social media. It's left-wing propaganda. Just look at the Twitter search feature.
It's only left-wing propaganda, but we are going to ignore the widespread voter fraud misinformation that was spread. We're going to ignore the fentanyl drug overdose, Derek Chauvin did nothing wrong, conspiracy theories around Derek Chauvin killing George Floyd. We're going to ignore all of the disinformation around Hillary Clinton and Uranium One, or we're going to ignore all the disinformation around any of these issues from the right. It's just the left wing. Right now, they were just complaining about how we're dividing the country and then say, it's the left dividing the country. It's all them. It's all their fault. Not us. We're fine. Man, we're so sick of these divisive attitudes. Anyway, the left, the radical liberal left who want to destroy the cops and dismember the cops and destroy America, they're dividing the country.
On any given day. They editorialize all the time. But dividing the country, social media, you know who's dividing the country? Leftists. Again, this is one of those things only an intellectual can't figure this out, or a liberal. When you all day, every day, focus on calling your political opponents racist, transophobes, homophobes, any word with an ist or a phobe.
Did he say a transophobes? Like a xylophone?
Out or a liberal. When you all day, every day, focus on calling your political opponents racist, transophobes, homophobes, any word with
transophobes. Gotta say, that's a new one. I haven't heard that one before. Transophone sounds like a fun instrument, though.
With an ist or a phobe at the end, an istophobic, phobophobic, phobophobe. And then you wonder why the country's divided? Right. You have an honest disagreement on taxes, school choice, everything. You're definitely a racist. You're like, wait, what? What are you even talking about? I'm talking about school choice. That's the left. And then you wonder why the country's divided. Give me a break.
They try to cancel you. I got to bring up this one other story that just struck me over the weekend, that Fox and Friends Weekend covered, and few other people did. The Daily Mail has a story of the Hunter Biden emails that show Hunter Biden.
They're still on Hunter Biden's email. We're so sick of this division. We're so sick of the division. We're so sick of it. Anyway, the president's son, who currently holds no authority in government,
knee deep with these Chinese company.
Oh, and we of course talked about how Donald Trump Jr. and Ivanka Trump and the advisory roles, or the fact that the president's son-in-law was supposed to be in charge of making a Middle East peace plan, or we totally talked about the corruption implications there. We totally talked about that when we talk about Hunter Biden, who currently holds no formal role in government. Man, the left is really dividing the country.
One of which spy had disappeared since then, and it shows he's been offered opposition research to his dad, Joe Biden, who happened to be running and winning a presidential campaign. Excuse me, China was helping the Bidens win an election. Will someone examine this story and tell me why you're not if you don't?
Think about this. Let's paint a contrast for you right now. What was the story we heard just 2 weeks ago? The mainstream media was all over it. They said,
oh my God. How much longer is okay, we only have a minute left. Okay.
oh my gosh, we have proof of the Russia collusion hoax. Paul Manafort shared opposition research, Trump's former campaign manager, with a Russian asset, Konstantin Kilimnik, who, by the way, was an Obama State Department source. It was a huge story all over Twitter, you know, the alleged social media company, right? Now we have evidence right now that an actual Chinese citizen associated with the spy chief of
An actual Chinese citizen. I had no clue those existed. Anyway, I think I'm good with this one. I think we've basically beaten this horse to death. I think that's enough of that one.